Today, we're beginning a new series called Facing Anxiety. And so it's a little ironic that I was anxious about teaching this. But there are different kinds of anxiety, right? I mean, do you remember when you were in school and there was a big test that you had anxiety? And hopefully, that anxiety inspired in you a desire to study so that you wouldn't bomb the test. And so there's actually a good benefit of anxiety, but then there are a lot of anxieties and stresses that are just bad for us. So we're going to be looking at that a little bit. Let me show you this. I did a Facebook survey. I just asked people, what are you anxious about? What are you worried about? What's your biggest fear? And quite a few of you in the room here responded. I deleted your names from this, so you won't feel embarrassed, okay? And then a lot of these responses are not from people in the room here. But this is what people said. One was fear of the unknown. Another was fear of rejection, not being good enough. Another, fear of failure. I'm taking a 3-hour test tomorrow, and my anxiety has been off the roof. Definitely the future. What happens if I spontaneously lose my job or develop a life-threatening health issue? Or worse, one of my kids or wife does? A lot of those what-if questions cause anxiety, right? Here's another one. What am I not anxious about? I'm anxious about the unknown, anything new that happens, the future, if I'm an okay mother, my child's and husband's well-being, car accidents, tragedies happening in my family. I also have social anxieties, so I'm afraid that most people find me annoying and don't enjoy being around me, among other things. It's amazing how transparent and vulnerable people are on a random Facebook survey. But this is big for so many of us, social anxiety, right? How about this one? I do not struggle with anxiety about money, health, or safety. I do struggle with fear of not making the most of the time that I have, of not making as big of a difference in the world as I could have, and of running out of time to achieve my goals. Does that resonate with any of you? I'm anxious about the world, because the world is a big and scary place. My children, hands down, their salvation and relationship with God, their success in school, protection physically, emotionally, and mentally. Yep, most of my anxiety is definitely relating to my kids and motherhood. Gosh, everything and anything. Work, kids, money, losing family members, weight, health, almost everything. We've got just a couple more here. For some reason, financial insecurity has always been the epitome of my worries. Even when times are good, it's always the what-if syndrome. I worry about everything all the time. It's a succinct one there. Struggle with the race at work. Some of us work in fields that are very competitive, and unless you keep up, you fall behind, and you're in threat of losing out. How about this one? I struggle with anxiety, and I think most people do. The irony is, it's all in our heads. 90+% of the stuff we worry about never happens. I found that doing the next right thing, the things we know we should be doing, eliminates guilt and fear from my life, and in turn decreases that hum of anxiety. Yeah, I think for some of us, anxiety is kind of like a hum just in the background. The twist is media and the modern pressure to conform refresh that anxiety and depress the awareness of its treatment. It's a modern-day plague, anxiety, #relax. And this is the last one. I feel anxiety-riddled when I am faced with a task and have to use my coping skills. So anxiety is a big deal, isn't it? Let's take a look at Philippians. What does the Bible say about anxiety? My point, I'll say it now so I don't lose it later. My point is simply this: God can help you. That's it. God can help you. I'm not going to get into detail. I'm not going to give you a method or a strategy. I just want to communicate. We have a number of weeks to focus at this subject. We're going to look at finances. We're going to look at relationships. We're going to look at work and school. We're going to look at all of that. But today, the point is simply God can help you with your anxiety. Okay? And I believe that because Philippians 4:6, which says, "Do not be anxious about anything." Now look, if there was no way out of anxiety and God says to us through his apostle, don't be anxious, what kind of thing is that? That's just cruel, right? So I believe it is possible. If it's a command, I believe it is possible to not be anxious about anything. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Now, some of us may know the context of this, but if you don't, you might be tempted to dismiss this statement, oh, don't be anxious about anything, as naive or as, well, that worked 20 centuries ago, right, for the time of the first century, and they were so close to the time of Jesus when this was written. But our world is more complicated today, Sean. You can't just tell me don't be anxious, right? We have social media now. Social media increases anxiety to a large degree for many of us. We have multitasking, right? Anybody ever get stressed out just multitasking? I could be sitting on my computer and there's one thing I'm trying to do, and then the phone makes a noise. And so then I go to do that, and then something else happens, and then something else. And now there's 4 things at once, and I feel like my head's going to blow up. Traffic. You ever get anxious about traffic? Anybody make the commute down the Twin Bridges? Just me. I'm the only one that does that. Shelby does it. Yeah, that could be a little stressful. Or bills. Anybody stressed about bills? These are all things that are different in our culture today than they had in the first century, right? What about that annoying phone call I keep getting from Spectrum? And it's always a different phone number. And it's a local number. It's not an 800 number. Because I wouldn't answer it if it was an 800 number. That's too obvious. So it's like very similar to my phone number. And then I answer it, and then there's that pause where you know it's not a human being anymore. And it's like, in all their infinite wisdom, these telemarketing organizations, you think they could figure out to not have that awkward pause there, where they go to the database and they're like, oh, somebody answered. All right, play the recording. And then, hello, this is Spectrum calling for Sean Finnegan. And I'm like, Sean Finnegan's not here, okay? They didn't have to deal with that in the first century, did they? Or what about the economy, or getting into colleges, or if you play sports, just the stress of the big game coming up, right? So our world is in many ways different from their world. Here's some facts for you. This is the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. They've got an association for everything, don't they? Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 40 million adults in the United States at age 18 and older, or 18.1% of the population every year. So now this is not just people that experience anxiety. These are people that are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Okay, so this is people that have taken it upon themselves to go seek help, and they went through the long process of being evaluated, and then they would be included in this number. Everyone who didn't do that but suffers from severe anxiety is not included in this statistic, and yet the statistic is still almost 1 out of 5 people in the country. That gets my attention. Does that get your attention? Anxiety disorders cost the U.S. more than $42 billion a year. Anxiety disorders are highly treatable, yet only 36.9% of those suffering receive treatment. And then these are the different kinds. You ready? General anxiety disorder, 6.8 million. Panic disorder, 6 million. Social anxiety disorder, 15 million. And then there are phobias, particular fears. Like if we had a little mouse just released right now in the room. Go ahead, Tom, do it. All right, so now it's scurrying right towards the middle of the room there. Just watch your feet. Did some of you get a little anxious about that thought? Right? I'm glad nobody jumped on top of their chair and screamed, because that would be embarrassing. But, some of us have phobias about little creatures. Some of us have phobias about heights and other things. Then you have obsessive compulsive disorder, which is strictly speaking not an anxiety issue, but these two go along with it. They're similar in some ways. Obsessive compulsive is 2.2 million. Post-traumatic stress disorder is 7.7. And so the end conclusion is that anxiety disorders affect 25% of kids also. So we had, 18% of adults, and then we also have 25% of kids. So this is a big issue, and it might not be your issue, but I bet you there's somebody in your life for whom it is their issue. And so I think we would do well to learn what, as Christians, how can we combat, how can we face anxiety? And what scriptures can help us to do that? Here's a couple more stats from the anxietycenter.com. Current estimates put this number much higher than 18%, approximately 30%, as many people don't seek help. So if that's true, it's more like 1 out of every 3 in the country instead of 1 out of every 5. More than half of college students, and college students are getting it really badly these days, about half of them sought help for their anxiety issues. So let's go back to this verse again. This verse is big. This verse is big in the first century, and it's big in our century too. And I want to go back to this verse because I bet out of all those 40 million people in America that struggle with anxiety, this is just, I can't know this for sure, but I bet the person who wrote these words in Philippians 4:6 that we dismiss so cavalierly as, theoretical or, an exaggeration or something that doesn't relate to our time. I bet this person who who wrote these words was under more stress, had more uncertainty about his future at the time of the writing of these words, had faced more rejection in social networks, and had more reason to fear danger to his life than all the rest of us Americans today. And yet, these words still stand here. Philippians 4:6, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Let's take a look at the Apostle Paul and his life a little bit. Look at chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 12. What was going on? Why do I say that? I bet he had more reason to be anxious and stressed and worried than anybody in our current culture today. That's a big statement. What was going on in his life? Well, Philippians 1:12 says, this is Paul speaking, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. This guy's imprisoned. Paul is, at the time of the writing of the epistle to the Philippians, he is imprisoned. He's incarcerated. What else do we know? Verse 14, and most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. So he's imprisoned, and prison in antiquity, generally speaking, it's not 100%, but generally speaking, the purpose of imprisonment was generally not punishment. It was instead a place to hold you until you found out what your sentencing was. Okay, so we have that in our culture today, but then we also have incarceration as punishment itself. You can get 10 years as a punishment. That's not the kind of deal Paul was in. He was waiting to hear what his sentence was, and then once he found that out, then that punishment would be immediately carried out. And so he's just waiting. Can you imagine that kind of situation? Would you be a little bit stressed out? A little bit anxious about the uncertainty of the future? I mean, here you are, and it's not entirely clear to me if he's in a jail cell at this time or if he's under house arrest, but we know that he's incarcerated and that he's waiting for a hearing with the emperor. And the emperor was not like a friendly guy, okay, at this time. So while he's in prison awaiting his fate, he's got other people out there. They're preaching the gospel. Some of them are preaching the gospel because they're just like inspired. They're like, wow, look at Paul's sacrifice. Let's go out there and move this message. And then other people are doing it deliberately to undermine him while he can't do anything about it because he's stuck in incarceration. He says in verse 23 that he's thinking about dying and just giving up. And he's like, that wouldn't be so bad. Then I could go and you're unconscious. However much time passes, Jesus comes, boom. Just feels like the blink of an eye, and you're with Christ. Or he says, but, I should live on, continue fighting on to live for you. I don't know. I think it's pretty impressive. Look at chapter 3. Here's another point to make about the Apostle Paul, the person who wrote the words, don't be anxious about anything. He says, a lot of us would say, well, yeah, but Paul didn't really have anything to lose. He was already poor. He didn't have, when you have a nice car, you worry about where you got to park it in the parking lot, right? If you've got a beater, you just park it right in that spot that's a little too skinny for your car, and you don't care. And you pop that door out, and you knock into that other car, and you're like, well, they parked too close. If you got a nice car, you don't do that. You park a little farther away, and you're very worried about it, right? And you get out there, and you're like, is that a scratch? And then you breathe on it, and you... So Paul didn't have a lot of money, so he didn't have anxiety. Well, let's look at this. Philippians chapter 3, verse 5 says, this is how Paul talks about himself. He says, I was circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. He was somebody. He didn't come from nowhere. He had a pedigree. He knew what tribe he was from. He knew what God expected, and he was doing it, and he was doing it well. And then in verse 7 he says, but whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, garbage, in order that I may gain Christ. So actually at this time in his life, Paul has already lost everything because the commodity, what you cared about in this culture and this time wasn't money. What you cared about was status. And Paul starts out by saying, look, I was born into status. I was circumcised on the right day. I am a Hebrew of Hebrews. He didn't say of a Hebrew. Both parents are Jewish. He says, we know our tribe is Benjamin. Guess where the first king came from? The tribe of Benjamin. Guess what the first king's name was? Saul, who is then named after that person. Okay? This guy is connected to his heritage. He grows up, and he's the kind of student that pays attention. He's the kind of student in his Torah studies in his local synagogue that stays after and asks questions until he masters what it is they're telling him to do. And then when he says, as touching the law, the righteousness under the law, blameless, he's not joking, he's not exaggerating. He really did do the law. He was that guy. And so as time went on, he had clout, he had status, he had reputation. He had access to the high priest in Jerusalem, we know, from the book of Acts. Normal people don't have access to the high priest. You have to be somebody to know or to have access to him. And he has direct access, and he has authorized letters from the high priest to go do a special assignment. Paul is somebody that has a clear career path lined up, everything set. He's a Pharisee of the Pharisees, the strictest sect of obedience to God. He belongs to it. He doesn't just belong to it, he's the poster child. He said, Sabbath, I got that. No problem. That's who he is. And he has everything to lose. And now to his own people, the Jewish people, to his own people, the majority say to him, now, you're a heretic. You have joined a cult, and you are no longer to be trusted. You're no longer to be listened to. We don't want to have anything to do with you because you're with these wacky Christians now. He has lost everything. And he says in verse 7, think about your fears, right? Think about your fears. What are your fears? What are your anxieties? What if I can't pay my bills on time? Right? A lot of our fears are about losing things. He's already lost it all. You see what I'm saying? He's been through it. He's done it. He's experienced that suffering. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't recognize bad things as being painful, but I'm saying that there's a possibility that if you're a child of God, when you face stressful situations, it should look different than if you're just somebody in the world. Don't you think? Yeah. Because you're connected to the Almighty. That should make a difference. And it certainly did in his life, and certainly for Christ as well. Verse 8, indeed, I count everything as lost because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. He's lost everything. He's lost his freedom. He's been rejected by his own people. There was a time when he first got arrested that 40 of his own people took a vow. Think about this for a moment. 40 people took a vow, and they said, we will not eat, we will fast until Paul is dead. We commit to basically never eating again and dying of starvation, or we're going to murder this guy. And they went to the priest, and they said to him, look, have Paul come out and act like you're going to ask him some questions, and we'll just bum rush him, and we'll knock him out, and we'll kill him. It'll be great. When's the last time 40 people ganged up on you and said, we're not going to eat again until you're dead? Would that cause you a little bit of stress? Would you worry? So you know what happened? Paul's nephew somehow found out about it and got his way to Paul and said to him, hey, these guys are trying to kill you. And so Paul alerts the necessary authorities, and they sneak him out at night, surrounded by soldiers. Well, guess what? Those guys didn't necessarily just all disappear just because Paul escaped. Then they pursued him to the next city, to Caesarea. And now they're there, and they're trying to get Paul to get sent back to Jerusalem because they want to kill him. His own people want to kill him. He's lost everything. And that's why he's in prison, because it's the safest place for him. And that's why he appealed to Caesar, was because it was the only way to get out of a lynch mob. That's what we're dealing with the Apostle Paul here. Of course, Caesar's a whole other problem. He's got that salad dressing and everything else. In the midst of all this, Paul's churches that he has planted are starting to turn against him. So he's in prison. He's somewhat safe from his own people, though he's not sure. And then he's about to face Caesar. He has no idea what his future holds. And while he's there stuck, you ever get that feeling of helplessness? Like you really want to do something, but you can't? There are people actually going to the churches that he started and actively undermining them, saying to them, look, Paul is not a real apostle. We are real apostles. That was 2 Corinthians. Read that sometime. These super apostles, as he calls them, come to town and try to get all the people to listen to them instead. And in the midst of all of this is what's so impressive to me today, 20 centuries later. In the midst of all of these reasons for him to have anxiety and stress and ulcers and all the other things that go with that, this guy says in Philippians 4:6, he says, be anxious for nothing, instead pray. Look at verse 10. Either this guy is out of his mind or he has discovered a secret to peace. Philippians 4:10. And here's what he explains to us. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. So Paul is in prison, and part of the deal with prison is that the prison doesn't supply your needs. You figure it out yourself. So you got to have some friends or some family or somebody to help you out. And the Philippians had sent Paul some money. And they sent it by this guy, Epaphroditus. And he came and he brought the money. And Paul is saying to them, I'm so thankful. This is partially a thank you note, Philippians. I'm so thankful for the gift that you gave me. Not that I need this. Not that I need this, because he says, verse 11, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. He's like, thank you for the gift, but I don't depend on the gift in order to have inner peace, to have contentment. He says in verse 12, I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. The Apostle Paul knew that he was not on his own. It might have felt like he was on his own. It might have felt like the world had turned against him, but he was not on his own. He believed that there was someone there strengthening him. He believed that he was able to tap into someone bigger than himself. And that makes all the difference in the world. I remember one anxious experience I had. I was trying to think of different ones. Most of mine revolve around taking tests in school. It's just I took a lot of tests. Anyhow, I thought of one that didn't relate to that. When I was I was trying to figure this out, like 14 or 15. I learned how to sail a sailboat at Silver Bay on Lake George at a family camp with he wasn't my brother-in-law yet, but my to-be brother-in-law, John Knowlton. He was already a sailor. I don't know how he learned, but he's an awkward 15-year-old, and so am I. And maybe he was actually a little younger. But he says, hey, let's go sailing. I said, okay, I don't know how to do that. He's like, oh, you'll be fine. So we go on the boat, and we're sailing around, and Johnny's doing everything. He's using the tiller. He's got the main sheet there. He's doing it. We're having a great time. Those of you who have never been sailing, basically it's a dance. It's a delicate dance between the wind that's pushing you this way to make the boat tip over and you that's pulling back this way to straighten it back out. And the more wind you have, the more you have to pull back, but the faster you go. It's a pretty sweet deal. So we're cruising around, and he says, oh, well, why don't you give it a try? And I give it a try. And the next time we go out, he's like, well, you do everything, and I'll sit here if you need me. I'll be here, and I do it, and it's fine. And he says to me, Sean, you're ready to go. Just go take the test. I said, all right. So I take the test. They set up 3 buoys. You have to go around the 3 buoys. This was in the mid-'90s. The test has changed a little bit today. But you go around the 3 buoys, and you come back, and they put your name in this book. And my name is in that book to this day. You can't just like ask for it, though. They have to go in the archives, back into the 20th century. Their current book is not that old. Actually, they probably have it computerized now. Actually, knowing them, they probably don't. But anyhow, now I'm qualified, John. I'm qualified. I can go out. And you know what they do is it's always a different person at the boathouse there. They say, well, are you in the book? That's always the question they ask. I say, yeah, I'm in the book. So they look, and they find my name, and they match my name tag, and they're like, all right, you can go. And I'm like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going. So I always had this secret fear, which is, what if the boat tips over? What do I do then? And John had never addressed that with me. And, he was good enough to make that never happen. And the certified people, like I wasn't going to ask them because that would evidence a lack of knowledge and I'd never get past the test, right? So I had to act like I knew what I was doing with them. So I got to the boat and I'm sailing around and I start to get in a little trouble. And the boat's starting to tip that way and I'm pulling back the opposite direction and I'm starting to get this sinking feeling in my stomach. What if I tip over? What if the boat goes over? What? I don't even know the protocol. Does that mean I have to pay for the boat? Does it mean that I get removed from the book of life of Silver Bay for tipping over one of their boats? What do I sink with the boat? I mean, does the boat sink? I don't even know if the boat sinks if it tips over or does it stay floating? I don't know because I've never seen anyone do it. I don't have any experience with it. I am completely clueless, but it's going down. And it's one of those slow-mo moments where you're pulling, and then suddenly the wind stops. And wind is funny like that. Sometimes it can stop. And guess what? When all your weight is pulling this way and the wind stops pushing that way, you know what happens? The whole boat falls on your head. Not literally, but the whole boat just started coming at me, and I'm trying to scramble around to get up, and it was too late, and so I go overboard and everything else, and it's a big splash, and I'm bobbing in my little life jacket, and the boat is floating there, and it's got like just one fin sticking up right through the middle, the center board, because it's exactly upside down. The sail is now in the depths of Lake George, deep down, however far it goes, and then the bottom is up, and I'm just bobbing there, and I'm just like, I wonder what would happen if I grabbed that center board and just pulled on it. If I could just, boop. And you know what? It totally worked. It totally worked. I reached up, I grabbed it, I put my feet on it, and I pulled, and I hung my butt out, and the weight just kind of slowly, and whoop, the sail came right out of the water, and there I was. I jumped back on it, and you know what? I have never been afraid of tipping over in a sailboat, at least that's small of a sailboat, ever again. You know why? Because I did it, and it wasn't the end of the world. I did it, and it wasn't the end of the world. But that's how anxiety is so often. It's this thing that we build up in our minds, and if you could have taken an internal look at my stomach, leading up to that, it was just knots turning, and I was in all this agony. And it was all just because I didn't understand what would happen, right? And so anxiety, a lot of times for us, is because of the unknown. We don't know. But here's the thing. If you have God in your life, whatever the unknown is, whether it's good or bad or somewhere in between, He's still there. You're still a child of God. It'll be okay. The worst thing that can possibly happen would be that you die, right? He's got that covered. It's called resurrection, right? That's like the trump card. Talk about playing spades. I mean, that's the ace of spades right there. It's already in the deck. It's in your hand. So I think there's really a lot here. And when we look at Paul, he's imprisoned. His body, by this point in time, has got to be aching. He's been beaten up repeatedly with rods, with stones. He's been whipped. He's just been through so much. And he even partially wishes for death at this point in his life. He's like, honestly, death would be better. That's how bad his life is at this point. But yet he says in verse 13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. At least he understood that he could depend on God. He could depend on Christ for strength. And look, if you're tapping into Christ or if you're tapping into God, look, they have strength. They have strength. Look at Philippians 4:6 again, just a couple verses up. I know we've read it a couple times, but we just got to look at it closely. Okay? Let's look at it closely. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. All right, so what he says is you don't need to be anxious. Instead, pray. Instead, pray. So look, when you feel anxiety coming, here's an idea. Pray. Verse 7, and the peace of God. Look at these big words. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Whew! There's some big words in there. So the idea is that you pray, and it's not just a prayer like, oh, God, I just want to align my will with yours. No, you're praying because you're facing a crisis. Something's happening. Something's about to happen. Your boat's about to tip over. You're about to have an issue at your job. Whatever it is, your relationships. You pray, and it's possible in a scenario like the Apostle Paul is going through, where his literal life is about to be judged one way or another. And just so you know, in the end, he was executed by the Roman government. In the end, he was executed. And he still had peace. Now, that doesn't make any sense. But he admits that. Look at verse 7. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. He's like, I know it doesn't make sense. That's okay. If you tap into God, you can have a peace that surpasses understanding. And that peace then can guard your heart. Sometimes our hearts need to be guarded, don't you think? Yeah. These words aren't shallow or naive or theoretical. They're forged through suffering from a man who had already lost it all and was in the process of losing it all and had the very real future prospects of being executed. And in fact, he was executed by the Roman government. And that man's got peace. So that's by looking at Paul, my point is simple. God can help you. God can help you to have peace in situations that are genuinely difficult. Not just built up in your head, but genuinely difficult. But it's even better than that. It's even better than that. Look at this. These are 4 verses, also from Philippians. I just put them on the screen here for you. But these are verses that talk about something that's better than peace. Peace is great, but joy is even better, right? And so Philippians 1:18, Paul writes, "What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. Yes, and I will rejoice." He's in prison. His body is in pain. He's probably has a terrible sleeping. We don't know what conditions he's dealing with here, and yet he is a man full of joy. There's more joy in the epistle of Philippians than most other places in the Bible. It's only 4 chapters long, and he's got joy and rejoicing 14 times in 4 chapters. Chapter 2, verse 17. "Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering," that means die, be killed, "upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me." This is possible. God can help you to have not just peace, but even joy in the midst of serious adversity. Chapter 3, verse 1. "Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things to you is no trouble to me and is safe for you." Chapter 4, verse 4. "Rejoice in the Lord always." Not just on your birthday, not just on your 20th anniversary. Always rejoice in the Lord, right? And again, I say, just in case we missed it, rejoice. So this is really big. What is this? He says, what Paul is telling us is that there is a joy, there's a peace that is available to you, unmoored from your circumstances. Okay? So you have your circumstances. There are real sufferings that we're going to face in this life. Some of them are unavoidable. Some of them are self-imposed, right? But whatever those sufferings are, it's possible that if you are tapped into God, if you're tapped into His Son, Jesus Christ, that you can have strength in good times and in bad times, and that you can have peace through it all, and that in the end, you can even have joy. Man, now that's a testimony. That's a testimony. Look, if somebody who knows you sees that you are full of joy and rejoicing, and you're not a delusional wacko, let's just say that for sure. While you're going through suffering, if you have joy and rejoicing, not that you're suffering, but joy and rejoicing that even though you're suffering, God is with you, that's going to testify. People are going to look at that and they're going to be like, all right, so what are you on? Can I get some of that? Yeah. We're on the gospel. You can have some of that. So, I think this is really, really important. Let's just close in Psalm 46. I just want to read the first few verses there because it's just so powerful, and really strongly recommend that if you do struggle with anxiety, if you ever face panic attacks or anything like that, what I understand about that is that you've got a narrow window when you feel anxiety coming on where you can do something, and then after that, I don't remember what Dr. Yukonis told me about. It was like a minute or 2 minutes. And after that, like the body's just going to do what it's going to do. But if you intervene right away with sharp onset of anxiety, you can actually change the course. And if you're going to do that, I would recommend these verses here. Psalm 46 says, "God is our refuge and strength. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." These are the kinds of verses that need to be deep in our souls. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Selah. We don't need to fear. Even if everything around us is crumbling and shaking and crashing, we don't need to fear if God is our refuge, if God is our strength, if God is our very present help in a time of trouble. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we ask that you would help us to tap into you better. Help us to see your incredible strength and your power. Help us to recognize that in the times that seem so difficult for us, you can still help us. You can still pull us out. and that through it all you are with us. And so we can be like Paul. We can be in the midst of chaos and trouble and adversity, and we can have peace because you are with us. And so we ask that you would help us to connect to you better. And I pray and I thank you for this wonderful day of celebration that we have together, celebrating what you have done here in this community church, that we could have an impact in people's lives for you and to your glory. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.